guys here?
I'm
Gonna screen
What's
the
that?
testimony
Either
in
side.
September.
Either
I find for calling last week. Do I keep the screening forms or do you guys want them back? Or?
Are they the originals we sent you? Or did we just?
No, I think via email.
I think I have their originals.
Okay.
So I'll just let,
Do I do anything about it or?
no, I'll let Cheryl know and Carla know and ask them if like we need to do that. Like, follow up.
I called Dot and I just told her that I called 4, 5, 6 times and
Yeah.
she's just, it's not gonna work for her.
And they know our number too.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Twyla?
I am sorry.
Okay. I know it's not 4 o'clock, but everybody's here, so we'll go ahead and get started. And see what we can do here. Before we go too far, there's just a few procedural things that I have to do and get them on the record. If you'll just bear with me for a moment. So the purpose of the conversation today is to consider 6 grievances filed by 6 separate speech-language pathologists. Grievances allege that the district has violated the negotiated agreement in that you're not getting 2 1/4 hours of unassigned time. And per day. And grievances were first filed with the principals. Principals gave a response. First, I have to say that the grievances filed by the speech-language pathologists were filed in a timely manner with the principals. Principals responded in a timely manner, and the grievances were submitted to the Central Administration Office in a timely manner. So they've all been properly filed as per the negotiated agreement. And we are now at step 2 of the negotiated agreement. Each one of the grievances were received in the Central Administration Office on February 19th of 2016. And according to step 2, the superintendent has 20 days, which is defined as calendar day, excluding legal school holidays. Were there any school holidays after February 19th, Vince?
I believe so.
I don't think there were. So given that there's 29 days in February this year, that would give me until March 10th to provide a written response, except that the grievance procedure does provide that if the parties so consent by mutual agreement, timelines may be extended in an effort to try and find a solution. Okay. So, I'm here to listen for a minute, but before I do, I just want to say, ladies, I hope that you understand we recognize your frustration. I hope we've made that clear to you, and that we've tried. And we are currently investigating. The assistant superintendent has given to his assistant information about services from the Philippines, trying to see if that will work for us as we move forward. So we are trying to turn over every rock in an effort to try and provide some additional assistance. We know that we've been advertising for over 2 speech therapists now for at least a year, and we've had 0 applications. And so I hope you don't feel like we're ignoring the problem. I hope you don't feel like that we don't understand it and that we're not empathetic to it, because we are. And so that's the message that I would like to start with, is that we're interested in trying to find a solution and help with this. But I also have one last comment that I have to make before maybe I listen to what you have to say. The assistant superintendent also serves as the business manager for the school district. And as such, he is accountable to not only the school board, but also to the accounting firm that comes in and conducts the audit of the school district finances every year. And whatever solution we try and come up with, he has to be able to demonstrate that there is some objectivity behind it. That we have worked together to come up with a real approach to try and address this situation. It can't be a situation where there's subjectivity that maybe some person, whoever it may be, whatever person walks in off the street could spin it and make it look like there was any collusion going on in terms of funneling money to somebody just because you happen to be neighbors. And so, you know, we're willing to try and work towards that end. We always have been. And I just haven't been able to figure out how to do it up to this point. So, having said that, I guess I'll listen for a few minutes.
Did I understand you to say that we are just grieving about the 2 point whatever hours per day? Because I think it's more than that. It is grieving the fact that we have taken on a humongous workload beyond just the prep time that you're referring to, that we aren't always rarely getting any prep time. And it is the fact that we have taken on 2.6 or 2.4, whichever number that you're going to use for the open positions. We are doing all the work of those positions. And so we are grieving the fact that not only are we doing the job we did last year, but that we are doing a split position of those positions that are open. We're all splitting the workload of that and not being compensated for it. And I also want to say that there has been a precedence in this district for paying people for working during their prep or taking on other loads, such as a science teacher, such as a counselor taking on an English position, such as PE teachers taking on other classes in buildings. They've been paid for it. So to us, when we were denied any payment for what we were doing, it was very offensive.
Well, that's what I tried to say at the outset. My purpose was not to say that, well, I'll address each one of them. In terms of my comment about the 2 1/4 unassigned time, I considered that to be an all-encompassing comment about your initial comments. Okay?
Okay.
Because we do understand that. And with respect to the offensive part, that's what I tried to say at the outset. I haven't been able to figure it out. Because I can look at your schedules and they're a lot of Greek to me. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but the schedule for a speech language pathologist is extremely unique from the schedule for a classroom teacher.
Yes, it is.
There are a lot more moving parts. And that's just a minute, and then I'll come right back to you. And that's where the complication comes in for myself and the assistant superintendent. We can't sit down and just look at a piece of paper and identify all those moving parts. Good Lord.
Yeah, I was just going to say there are a lot of things, when we've talked about this as a group, there are not, when we make a schedule, it's really just what kid am I saying at that point in time. There's a lot of stuff, and we went over that when we met in December. There's a whole ton of things that we do throughout the day, responsibilities that we have that aren't anywhere on a schedule. You know, whether it's calling for meetings or the paperwork that goes along with that, the following up, and none of that's planning. None of that fits in planning for seeing a kid. Various members of this group have tracked time throughout the day, and I've been really hesitant to do that because I knew it would make me hate what I'm doing. And I really love what I do. But I finally did last week, and it's really, really ugly. I decided last week that on Friday that I was going to track literally from the minute I walked in the door until the minute I left. And then I also tracked what I did on Saturday, part of it at the building at Roosevelt, and part of it at home. But it is literally down to the minute. I had 1 personal phone call and 3 bathroom breaks. I did not have lunch. I did not have any planning, and I literally did not do any paperwork. But that's my schedule for last Friday and Saturday. So that will show you some of the things that we
Saturday?
do. This is just Friday. And this is Saturday. So that will show you some of the things we do. Because I agree, it is hard to read that and say, well, this says, like I know mine says, oh gosh, paperwork, testing. There's a lot of times that I'm not testing. And as you see here, there's a whole bunch of times that I'm doing something other than paperwork. This is a fairly typical day lately. They're not all like that. This day, for example, I didn't cancel any kids. There's a lot of days where I have to cancel kids because I have to do other things. I am really behind on paperwork. I would guess all of us are really behind on paperwork, really behind. And that's something where the district is definitely affected because we're gonna be out of compliance, big time. So, I mean, we're all drowning. We're all, and I know you know that, but we're drowning.
And there may be times when we might have some time that is not down listed as prep or as student contact time. But then if you take a student to test, then you've used up that some of what you constitute as prep time. And that creates more work later. And then you have your other work that you also have to do. You have your planning that you have to do. And it's just, it's increasing, and it's just getting to be such a monumental piece that we're just breaking from it.
Dr. Sullivan?
Mm-hmm.
I just need to respond to a comment that Merrill made in terms of precedent being set with subs, and Lyle has asked, you know, what we did in the past, and those are so quantifiable when we've done that. When Pete Dobitz was in Iraq and other science department people took his class, took physical science A, that we know because there's a subform. It's easy to track. They're in there for 90 minutes. We paid them extra, and it doesn't happen in the elementary school, but it does sometimes happen at Hagen if somebody takes their prep and fills in for a regular class, because there's a bell at the beginning and a bell at the end, and so those are so easy to track, and this kind of goes along with Dr. Sullivan's statements. There is no period where somebody else, where you filled in for someone, and so that's what we're struggling with.
But it's quantifiable in the amount of positions that were at minus.
Well,
There were
I
9
don't know
last
that it
year, there are
is,
6
because if
this
we
year.
hire additional elementary teachers or less elementary teachers and they have more kids or more work, I mean, that, I don't know that, you know, 8 years ago, how many speech path people we had. I could go back and track that, and as we've added or subtracted, we've never adjusted accordingly. The number of kids on caseloads doesn't just go by how many people we have employed. It comes on student needs, obviously, but it's different than what we've done in the past. And I'm not saying that it can't be done, but it's so different in that there is a period at Dickinson High School where, and a few years ago, we didn't have a science teacher at the beginning of the year, but we had a young man coming from Jamestown. And so for 17 days, we tracked Greg Young, if he was in that 4th period, filling in, and he got paid accordingly. I mean, it was very exact, and it didn't have to do with, it had to do with that person taking that class. And the high school is different than what you guys do in elementaries, but it is very quantifiable.
Even though we lost those speech pathologists, and so we're not at the same number we were last year, that work hasn't gone away.
No,
And
I'm not
it's
suggesting
just
that it
increased.
has. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
our
I'm not-
workloads have increased
I'm not saying that it has.
immensely.
And I guess I think that we feel as a group that these are the conversations that we wished we could have had when we met September and October, and that it didn't take us this long to have this conversation because we didn't realize that people stepped up to the plate and were compensated for things. We didn't realize that, and it wasn't something that was approached to us, and so these are the conversations that we really have been wanting to have since the beginning. We really want to talk about our workload and what we're doing and our schedules, and we really want to talk about the help that we need.
Okay.
And the help that we need needs to be in certified people. I appreciate that you had offered some para help at one time. That just doesn't really work for our positions. And just commenting about, it is so quantifiable in other areas. I appreciate that, I understand that. So when numbers increase for teachers and class size gets big, you have class size reduction funds, so the workload is increased for those teachers. There's another position too that's created. I guess, isn't there some way that we can parallel that extra help that they get to the extra help that we need?
And I think that's where we had that the discussion back in September, October with when there's a trigger point with kindergarten sizes, then we add para support. And I hear you saying that, and we talked about that as an option. But I hear you saying that that's not the solution.
Yeah, legally it can't be for us.
Right.
And so that, yeah.
Unless they're doing other things, but they clearly can't pull kids out. We get
And they
that.
can't do the paperwork.
We get that, yeah.
And I do
And we
have,
talked about how we arrange schedules, and I think you came up with a unique one with, you guys brought those solutions as possible, with seeing kids on 4 days and not on the 5th and some other things. We've talked about a lot of different things, so.
it still doesn't make the work go away,
Yeah.
even doing that.
Yeah.
I do have some numbers. I went back as far as I could. I am missing my 2011 year. I know I can find it if I keep digging, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of the numbers of students I saw, and I averaged it.
Excuse me.
And the number of kids I saw in 5 years, an average was 31.5. And this year I'm at 55 with 14 outstanding evals yet. So I could be at 60 some. So which would mean it would be a double caseload. So that kind of comparison is a comparison that to me is quantifiable. And I also have done some time studies, and this was 1 week, and I didn't spend the whole weekend there, but from Saturday, a week ago, last Saturday to the previous Saturday, I had put in 26.5 additional hours, and that wasn't including the hours I put in this past Sunday. And typically I spend at least a day and a half there. I've already spent one night this week till 8 p.m. at school. I can't keep up.
And if I could just add that another example would be that from 2000, help me out, 1, when I started, to 2009, I worked at Hagen, and I was the sole provider there, and I had 29 students. And now Sherry covers Hagen in addition to 3 other buildings.
So are you suggesting that one other thing we should look at is basing contracts on caseload?
I don't know what the answer is to that. I
Because
have
right
not
now,
done that
that's not
research.
being done anywhere, whether it's Reg Ed or SPED or SLP or coaches, it wouldn't even be allowed by negotiated agreement on class size or how many caseloads, and if we have an LD teacher with X, is that the same as an SLP with X? I don't know.
I don't know how you could do that because
Well,
it fluctuates
exactly.
almost
Right.
weekly.
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to get my head around, would that even be
But-
possible,
But the
I don't
grievance.
think it would.
The grievance, when Meryl says she's putting in 26 hours in a weekend,
Not,
the
that was through the
grievance-
weekend.
but the grievance is 16, works out to be 16 hours a week. And we, as a group, feel that that is a very conservative number of what we're doing in addition to our contract hours. Very conservative on any given week for any one of us. And Meryl's probably putting in surely more than me.
I don't
know
have
that.
children. I can afford to go to the school. My husband's not happy with me, to be honest with you, but I don't have children.
So, just, I mean, at some point in time, we have to develop some common understandings and common definitions of things if we're gonna try and move this forward. For example, I pretty well understand what it means for Mr. Smith to sit down and have a preparation period and what his planning looks like. In my mind, I think that there are some things that speech language therapists that do that are different, but they're still planning. But I don't know what they are.
I have not used any of my planning to write lesson plans for my students, make materials for my students. These are the things we would consider preparation. Making lesson plans, researching new ideas to reach those. We create our own curriculum, by the way. We don't have a curriculum to follow where the materials are written in a book. We create our own based on the goals of the IEP and the student needs. I have not made materials. I have not created lesson plans during a prep period during my day all year. I don't have time for it.
Well, just so that I can try and understand it. You know, because like I said, I don't understand everything about speech language pathologists. An IEP is an individual education plan. How was the time involved in preparing that different from a teacher who sits down and does lesson plans for an entire class?
Well, one thing that I have, and I have it added, I'm not sure if you got a caseload sheet or not, but the number of IEP students that I have, when you fill out that IEP as a team, you look at, is this child needing any assistive technology? And that might be visuals, that might be some type of device to help them talk, that might be a button. There are lots of variables of what that might look like. I have 17 children on my caseload that, according to that IEP, have to have assistive technology provided to them. And we can do that at school, but that's a legal requirement that you have, if you're giving that child a voice at school, that has to go home with them as well. So
It has to what?
that you have to provide them some way to go home, some type of communication device to go home with them as well. It could be very simple, like a piece of paper and some pictures that they could point at, you know, just to go home. At school, it could be an iPad that we have. There could be lots of different things that look like. And there, out of the 57 kids I have, just 17 of them have their own assistive technology device that they need to use. I don't have planning time at school. I do on Friday afternoon have a couple of hours that I'm able to work on that, but for 17 students, I'm needing to take that home at night and on weekends. Building them, different board making, that PECS grant that we had, that's what we're using with a lot of my students. But I'm having to go in and make an individual for every one of those students. And then as they progress, I have to change that. So it's probably every couple of weeks that all of that needs to change. So that would be one thing that in my planning time, that would be one of the things that I would do that I don't have time to, that I'm needing to take home and work on, and that's a lot of time. That's IEP related that I can't just get rid of. It's a legal document that's in, so.
No, I understand.
And I think that the actual typing the IEP is such a small part of our big problem, because we can type the IEP, but now we have to follow what's in it. And so now that we do that, we have 50 different kids with different diagnoses at different levels of functioning, and to have to figure out how to work with someone who's apraxic and someone who's a swallowing disorder, or someone who's got oral motor conditions. Prepping is trying to figure out what these conditions all are and what we have available, and collaborating with each other to see who's got this kind of equipment.
Well, and a regular classroom teacher is going to prepare lesson plans for their class, and they work very hard at that. And speech pathologists, if we see, I may see 15 to 20 kids in one day, I'm preparing 15 to 20 different lesson plans for that day. Different lessons for those different students. You know, one student comes in and I've got to do maybe an articulation goal with him. The next student comes in, he's nonverbal autistic, I've got to have something else in place for him. I can't plan one lesson for the day and call it good for all my students. I'm planning for different students throughout the day, throughout the week.
And I appreciate all that, and that part I understand.
Okay.
You know, that you have a lot of unique needs with kids. And we also know that we have some unique kids in classrooms, but not as many, probably as what you have in terms of being individualized. But I'm still trying to understand how is an individual education plan different from a teacher planning for a classroom. I'm not talking about the components of what the students need. I'm talking about the time. That's what I'm asking. I'm talking about the time. How is the time involved in that different from the time that the teacher sits down and develops lesson plans for the classroom?
Well, she does one for math, reading, science, social studies, and it's for all of her students. We do one for each of our groups, but inside each of our groups, like I have 4 first graders, I see 2 autistic, 2 non-autistic. So we individualize within a group. So our lesson plans are even further defined. They do differentiation in the classroom. We do individualization within there.
And I understand. The only part that I'm talking about is the time.
Time.
How is the time involved in that different? Please don't understand, I'm not trying to minimize anything. I'm just asking, how is the time involved in one activity different from the time in another activity?
A teacher may have to just run off their materials. We have to create them. Sometimes we have to research to find them.
I know,
We don't
but
have a
that's-
curriculum to
I
follow.
know, but that's not talking about that.
But that's more time.
That's time.
That's time.
I understand that, but I'm just asking, how is the time, what makes the time doing one activity different from the time doing the other activity?
To create that, or to get to the point of writing the IEP, and this is how it's different from a teacher, is that you have to have a meeting. And you have to have a meeting with the teachers, you have to have a meeting with the parents, you have to have,
Child study team.
I'd say with each IEP, there's a minimum of 5 meetings. And each meeting generates more paperwork, generates testing, generates the different individual. And in that way, one way it is different from a general education teacher, in that they don't have to meet with the parents. And, you know, once you write an IEP, it's not always stays like that.
But all special ed teachers do that, right?
You know, that-
Yeah,
To some
but
extent.
Ladies, please understand, I'm really reluctant, because I don't want to give you the impression at all that I'm trying to minimize what you do. Because that is not my goal here. My goal here is to try and find where we can come to some common definitions, and that's one area where I'm having some difficulty. And Ms. Mayor, I respect everything you said, and I understand. I've sat through some difficult child study teams as a superintendent in a previous position, so, you know, I understand the process, and I understand its importance. But all I'm trying to understand is what makes the time doing one activity different from the time doing the other activity, because it's planning for education. One's an individual education plan, the other, for lack of no descriptor, is a classroom education plan.
Let's
Okay.
do,
I don't think that's the point. I
Well,
think the
no.
point is, okay,
Just bear with me, because
Okay.
I really don't want this conversation to go south, you know, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. All I'm trying to do is try and figure out how we can come to some common understanding of a few things, then we can get to the objective piece, because I'll be very frank with you. Using 2.6, just because we had 2.6 last year, is not objective. And from my research, there is no standard caseload established for speech-language pathologists that says if you have kids that have Artic problems, you can do 45 of them. If you have kids that slur, you can do 25 of them. You know, I'm not aware of any threshold like that. And so the .43, while it is mathematical, it's not objective math. And that's what I really want to try and figure out, is how we can come up with something that, and it doesn't, please understand, it doesn't have to be 100% nailed down, pinned down objective. As long as he and I can sit in front of the auditor and say, yes, we spent X thousands of dollars and this is why, and this is how we did the calculation, then I won't have any problems defending it. So I'm just talking about the time, and I don't want to minimize or offend anybody.
I think it's difficult for us to just compare lesson plans because I think the teachers don't have the other paperwork component that we have that is so huge in comparison. There is no comparison in terms of the paperwork we have versus a classroom teacher. So it's difficult for us to just compare lesson plans.
One factor that hasn't been mentioned, I guess, when you're talking about prep for your students is any given classroom teacher is planning for one grade level. None of us plan for one grade level.
I understand.
So that's one factor when you have 50 students and you're planning anywhere from, you know, K through 8 in my case. You've got high school, I guess you don't treat high school, but you have to go to those meetings and test and that kind of thing. So we're looking at materials for not only multiple disabilities, you know, Artic, language, autism, cerebral palsy, I mean, on and on and on and on and on. So we're looking at multiple disabilities. Most kids have multiple goals, so we're not just addressing one goal, although in one session we may only address that one goal. So over the course of a month, we may have to, and you know, you get to progress reports and go, my gosh, I haven't even addressed this goal in 3 months, you know. So we have multiple goals to address. So we have to pull not one material or 2 materials, we have to pull multiple materials. We may have stacks of books in our rooms. There's books I have never opened. I've been there a year and a half, I haven't even opened them because I don't have time. So we have to look through and find those materials. We have to research those materials. If we have a new kid that we've never worked with that type of a client before, we have to research it, hopefully collaborate with each other on that, create materials, purchase materials out of pocket. We do that a lot. So there's, and a lot of times if you're printing things, then you're printing them, you're cutting them out, you're laminating them, they're cutting them out again. I mean, that's a huge amount of time that we're spending on that. I don't know how else to explain that. You keep asking the time, and it's really hard to make sense of that, but we're talking multiple grades that we're preparing for, multiple levels in each of those grades that we're preparing for, multiple objectives in each of those, if that makes any sense. And just hunting down the materials. We don't have, and I know teachers sometimes are not happy to follow the curriculum they're given, I understand that, but they are typically given a math curriculum that they follow. So when she says they just copy off worksheets or print off worksheets or papers or whatever, that's because they're given a curriculum. We are not given a curriculum. We invent the curriculum.
And I want to recognize that we understand, I mean, all of my regular ed colleagues do a tremendous amount of paperwork too. We are not minimizing that in any way. But, and there's so much variance. I know that you're trying to be objective and you're trying to find a way to pin it down to make it objective. But for each kid, you have X amount of hours of paperwork. So now we have that increased number of kids. So that amount has been multiplied and it can't fit in a day. It can't fit in what was our prep time. It can't fit because we have so many meetings. It can't fit because we have to be testing kids. So that time goes into our evening hours and our weekends. I don't know if that might make it seem a little more objective.
I can add a little bit to that, Dr. Sullivan, as a comparison. I have 2 students who are in the 2nd grade who have writing disabilities. And so I have researched and follow the Lucy Calkins writing program that they have. And so I called the teacher and I talked to her about it at night because I do not have a prep time or a collaboration time. So we talk about what they're going to be doing for the week, and then I get her, I don't have a copy myself, so then I go to her and I find the copy, I copy it for the week, and then I go through that lesson plan and I plan the writing for the week. That's 2 of my 50 kids. So if that helps, I mean, that's 2 of the kids where that would be her writing lesson for the week. And that's just mine for 2 for the week.
Okay, I'm gonna try again. I full well understand that after the child study team meeting's been completed and the IEP has been defined, as we do move forward, that your paperwork load on that student is a lot because of all the federal and state regulations that you have to comply with. So I'm not trying to tell you, and I'm not trying to say to anybody that they're identical, but there has to be a portion somewhere of that IEP process that is the same as teachers developing lesson plans for their classroom. There has to be at least a portion of it.
But the IEP, sir, and the lesson plans are 2 different things.
Well,
We do the IEP, but then we also do the lesson plans.
I know, but the IEP is an individual education plan. The classroom lesson plans are a group educational plan. And there has to be at least a portion of that that is the same. But again, I'm not trying to offend anybody. You know, I'm just trying to say we just need to try and work together and figure out what that is.
Okay, so if we say that you plan, the teachers plan, in that sense, it's the same, but they're not getting that time.
Well, no, they sit in IEPs all the time. I know you do. Every one of you do. Every special ed teacher in this district sits in an IEP. But I'm saying that at least a portion of that has to be the same as developing lesson plans for the classroom. I'm not saying the whole thing, because I know that your paperwork burden is much larger.
Could we equate the IEP to the curriculum? In a sense, it's the goals, it's the scope, maybe, in a small portion. For a year, it's the scope of what we're gonna do. And the teacher's curriculum is the scope of what they're gonna do this year. Then they write lesson plans to meet that curriculum. We write lesson plans to meet the IEP. Does that
Yeah.
flow to you guys?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because
That's
they're unique,
exactly what.
they're unique needs that each child has.
Does that
They
make
are-
sense?
That helps. You know, I think that helps move us closer. I really do.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I don't want to give the impression that, because I don't know how long it takes, and I'm certain that every student is different. If you have a student who has an Arctic problem, that's going to be probably a lot faster to complete that process than if you have a student who's, say, because I've seen one of these children in my career, a selective mute.
Mm-hmm.
They're completely different and require, one's going to require much more extensive, not only engagement and intervention, but also paperwork, as opposed to a child that just has an Arctic problem. And I want to say this, I'm going to take a divergent path here for just a second, and then we'll come right back to it. I did look at, Mrs. Martinson gave me some information. I find it amazing that speech language pathologists, some of the things you do, because until I looked at that notebook, I had no idea that you guys deal with whether kids can understand words, that you deal with whether they understand the context of words, you deal with whether they understand how words are used in a sentence. I mean, I can't remember. I looked at that list and I'm going, geez, I always thought they dealt with, like I told you, kids that slurred, kids that were selective mutes, kids that had lisp, kids that had Arctic problems, and tried to get them to be able to just speak.
You're
I
not
didn't.
alone.
Huh?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
And we appreciate- we really
I looked
appreciate
at that
the research.
list and I was blown away. I just went, because.
We appreciate that.
But so, now we'll come back.
But that's, it's good that you understand that, because that's part of why that planning is so vast. If it was just our TIC, it would be so much more straightforward. It would be like a science teacher that just teaches science. Now, science has a lot of different moving parts.
Yep.
Our TIC does too. It's different to make one sound from another. But when you're talking our TIC and language and autism and on and on and on, it's a lot more when you realize all the different types of needs and disabilities and factors that we're working on and goals that we're working on.
So let me ask one more question, because I have these here. I asked the assistant superintendent to send an email to the principals and get your schedules. I just have two questions. I'm assuming you do your own schedules, because you're the only ones in the building that understand them.
We do them and redo them and redo them and
Well,
redo
I'm
them.
sure you do, because particularly with the migration we've had in the last few years, the inward and outward mobility, I'm sure that that's been a hardship on you. And so, as far as you know, and I'm not gonna hold you to this, okay? These would be the current schedules that the principals gave me. Now, I accept that since I've had them for about a week,
Yeah.
there's probably been a couple I know for fact, because I recognize the name on here. I know that for sure one kid has left
Yeah.
and could have been replaced already. But in general, these would be accurate in terms of how the day flows.
I
think
would
I
like
had-
to update mine with you
Well-
because I changed
And I think I
it
sent
to
in
no names.
one
Yeah.
this week as well.
So,
Yeah,
as
I
I
think I
said,
have
what
one
I'm
more
trying
one,
to do,
but
I'm
we
trying to
should-
find a solution, and this conversation is helping me.
Are you familiar with what Mandan does for their
I'm
special
not
ed people?
familiar with that.
Okay. We have a page from their contract, it's their negotiated agreement, it's actually page 9 of their negotiated agreement, and it's talking about compensation for special ed personnel. And it's saying certified special education personnel, who we would be, who cover vacant positions, including case management duties, will be paid a fractional portion of their daily rate for each day. It's not item D, for a fractional portion of their daily rate for each day equal to the portion of the vacant position they cover. For example, if a certified teacher covers 50% of the position for 30 days, they will receive an additional 50% of their daily rate for 30 days. That's how Mandan is quantifying theirs.
What year is this from, Mel?
Fern gave it to us,
Okay.
and so I'm thinking she got it from this year.
We'll take a look at that, and one of us will contact Mandan and have a conversation with them about that. Obviously, we can't do this in this room. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, that-
But I just thought this was
that-
another piece
that-
of information for you.
Well, you
No, it's-
could,
it's
but it
great
wouldn't be
info.
at this meeting.
Yeah, it'll be in this room, but it won't
Go
be at this
ahead.
meeting.
Yeah. We'll plug our ears.
Meryl, it's great
No, I would
information, and I
object to that.
appreciate you bringing it.
Or you should.
Okay, so what I would like to propose is that somehow, and it's gonna take a while, that we sit down and try to come to some common understandings of some of these questions that we have. Because, you know, I'm trying to be as honest with you as I can. I'm going to look at. You know, each one of these schedules, when I look at them, show sometime between 8 and 8:30 or 8:40. That is unassigned. And as you've said, I know things happen during that time. We just don't know what that is.
What we
That's why we can't look at this and say, you know, say exactly what that is.
We did go through and talk about this in depth to make sure that we really had a good idea of what that time was used for. And as of today, I wrote down every IEP meeting, we cannot, in my school, we do not have meetings during the day. We have them at 8 o'clock or at 3 o'clock. And so I've had 90 meetings, either at 8 o'clock or at 3 o'clock.
This year, Dana?
We have our meetings on, listed on that
You
caseload
put-
number.
Oh, down here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ms. Price, define meetings for me. What does that mean?
It's either an IEP meeting, or it's a meeting to meet with the parents to talk about their concerns moving forward in testing. It's an initial meeting where they've been referred to us, and now we meet with the family. We go through the profile and the assessment plan or the planning process. Or it's a meeting to talk about progress reports.
About what?
Progress reports, we do quarterly progress reports. Or it's a
And you
meeting,
talk with whom about them?
parents and teachers, principal,
Okay.
and whoever else involved with the child. And it's evaluation summary meetings. So after we test, we have to get together and talk about the testing results. You know, it's all part of the process of the things that we do. It's never, we didn't include any meetings where it was like a building level support team meeting. We didn't include any of those where everybody comes. We only included IEP kids meetings.
No staff
And I-
meetings, anything like that.
No.
I defined my meetings as any meeting that generated IEP paperwork that was completed on TINET.
Just
That's how I
meetings.
defined the meetings.
From-
So-
And we're all like 70 to 90
For everyone.
for the year.
Nope, that's
Well,
just
these
for
caseloads, you'd have to.
Oh, okay.
Once
Oh,
a year.
yep, okay, thanks, that helps. Yep, yep.
But that's how everything at every meeting I went to generated some type of paperwork. That's how I defined that.
And some of
And
us
that's
share.
a good point, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
That's a good point too, about every meeting creates paperwork, because
Yes.
you have to write either an IEP from it, a meeting summary, an assessment summary. That's a big portion of what we're concerned about.
I think for our job specifically, and I'm not quite sure if you're aware of this, but as speech language pathologists, we have kids who have a primary disability in language or articulation or communication. But we're the only specialists that also often have a secondary disability. So even though that's not their main disability, we still see them as secondaries. So that is why our numbers have increased, because not only are they LD, but they can be LD in speech. And so most of ours, we end up getting our case manager students, but also secondary
You lost me.
disabilities.
I understand the kids have multiple disabilities
So if somebody is diagnosed as having a learning disability,
and a speech disability.
they can also be diagnosed as having a speech and language disability.
Right. But
So-
you don't see them because of the learning disability.
We see them because of the speech disability,
Right.
but we also we have to be at all their meetings.
You have to,
Be at
Well, I
all
have
those,
when, say, goals are set because of the learning disability, you have to be attendance at that?
if they have a speech and language disability in addition to that.
Because we set our goals at that same meeting.
So if I have a student
So-
I've got a specific learning disability student, but they also have a speech goal, Sherry has to come to my meetings.
But it's
Because,
Not an extra meeting, or is it?
She's
or-
gotta
We
come-
would be
yeah.
at the same.
Okay. But
So
it's
if
not
it's a speech-only kid, Lee doesn't need to be
Right,
there.
right.
I run it. But if it's both, then I have to go to that one as well.
But then you don't have to replicate it for just the speech, right?
Correct.
Okay.
You still probably write the goals, though. I still write my speech goals, if it's a
And I'll write
secondary
my
speech kid.
section,
And my
update
communication
the
section.
Adaptations and services.
and the one extra thing that you have, Sherry, is that you're on schools with different schedules. So
Right.
we're on a trimester at Hagen, whereas everybody else, so progress reports to you are almost ongoing.
Yeah. Which is why mine are all behind.
Yeah,
All of them, every school.
yeah.
I also service kids, not only at Prairie Rose, but Hope Christian. And I cover all the meetings there and the evaluations in Dickinson High School and Trinity High School. So many of those meetings, I just came from one at Dickinson High School. And oftentimes I have to cancel my students at Prairie Rose so I can go attend a meeting elsewhere.
And just so you know, Ellen, when Doug and I have visited with Dot, you know, she points that out because you have
Okay.
multiple buildings.
Okay.
It isn't just caseload,
Mm-mm.
quantify it, put it on the scale because
Well,
you have different
yeah.
sites.
And we as a team have often, since before school even started, but often since school started, we have to, take on additional, I mean, we try as often as we can to keep things I hate to say even, but
Right.
I don't know if there's a way to keep them even, but we
Goal,
try
right.
really hard.
And I guess I just have concerns. I look at my meeting as 90 meetings that happen, and I'm counseling students, and those times aren't always made up because we can really see students.
Seldom, if ever.
I have a lot of concerns about that. And also as a parent of a child on an IEP, I have really big concerns about how much, I mean, that technically is illegal, that those minutes aren't being met. And I feel like it's only a matter of time until other
We have talked
parents
about
are.
that. We're very concerned, not only for ourselves, but also for the district, because we have been missing minutes. We've been missing a lot of minutes.
We're out of compliance
We
in a
have
lot of
to.
areas.
You know, when you don't have a prep time and you're testing, there's nothing to do but to miss the kids, to see the,
So I just see that as a big liability, possibility.
So let me ask this, how can we try to drill down to a number? I mean, obviously, I don't think we can accomplish it tonight. It would require us to mutually agree to extend the timeline, and please don't understand, the last thing that I want to do is have more meetings. I'm just like you guys. I bet I've almost had 90 meetings this year. But this is an important discussion. And if we can try and come to a mutual understanding of what it looks like, we might be able to craft a solution together that we can defend to
What
the
if-
accountant.
What if we look at, okay, so a classroom teacher would write lesson plans for, I don't know how many subjects they would teach each day, and then take that times 5, and that would give you the amount of lesson plans they write, and then we write one for every student we see
Yeah.
every week. What, I'm not sure what, you know,
Yeah,
if
I
they're
don't know.
writing one for.
There's probably multiple ways we could try to look at it. All I'm proposing, I guess I'll just put it out there, what I'm proposing is we extend the deadline and try and come up with a solution.
I'm excited about that, but I think it needs to be soon, because there are people planning to not come back, and they have other opportunities starting, so I would rather
I agree with you.
do it as soon as we can, because losing one of us is gonna be fairly traumatic, so.
It has
I mean,
been
it's not
said.
It's not something that I think should be delayed in any shape or form.
Can you tell us where you're at right now?
Well, I think I've tried to explain it. We're willing to, because you're exactly right, and the assistant superintendent confirmed it. I mean, we have paid for people to take other classes, particularly, I mean, the example he used was with the Gulf War deployment. We had 2 teachers that we had to do that with. And so there's no doubt about that. We're willing to try and get there, but we have to have some objectivity to it.
We could not do this.
We can't, no, at this point.
Right.
This would be something, as I said, we'll call Mandan and we'll visit with him. It might be something we'll discuss with the school board, but I'm not gonna make that promise to you, okay? That the school board will forward this.
We also have some other figuring here that we have done, and Lee, you're gonna have to help me with this because you and Fern were doing the figuring, but we'll give you a copy of this as well. We have all of our salaries here. And we figured it out, how much it would cost the district in terms of TFFR, and did she figure insurance in here as well?
We figured, well, FICA and Mateo, yeah.
Yeah, so they figured this out and what it would be a cost to the district, and then below that, they figured out how much it would cost if we were hiring that many positions that were a brand new master's level speech pathologist, 0 experience, what it would cost the district, is that correct? And so we have those figures for you too,
Okay.
based on what we had proposed in our grievance.
Do you want the one that's the one with the training teachers, what it costs you?
And then we did some figuring with Tiny Eye too. It's $80 per hour per child if we went that way for help. 297 students being seen by SLPs 2 times a week. We said that's not what all kids are being seen, but, and if they were being seen 3 times a week, and that does not include the cost of the para and,
Or the technology.
or the technology that would be needed to do Tiny Eye. So
Give us make copies of.
I'm
One
not-
thing we said that was that the 290 students to get to that $80 per hour per
I
student.
couldn't hear you.
All right, the Tiny Eye that we said cost $80 an hour. Well, they don't see kids an hour each week.
Right.
So to get to that hour, it would be 3 times a week, say if we saw that. And that's how we came up with these figures. If you didn't want it, it's,
Okay.
okay. So,
If you can just email it to me, that'll be fine.
okay,
That'll be
Yeah.
fine.
But you can share the figures.
yep.
How are the top one and the bottom one different? I missed that.
The
That's-
one is 75 days, and the top one's 75 days, and the bottom one's 70 days.
Oh, you didn't put the one in there that was on
Oh,
the
the
brand
2,
new
4,
MS
Yeah.
plus
2,
0?
6, okay.
No,
think
that's,
this is 2.6,
I've got on
it's
this
2.4.
one.
Okay, it
Okay.
has to do with whether it was 2.6 or.
Okay, she didn't put the
All
one
right,
that
so
was for the
3
brand new.
teachers at a base salary of 50,400 times 3, because that's the number of positions you're advertising for. I've got that, I can show you.
And I'm confused with, the only benefit used was TFFR.
I think she was figuring insurance
Yeah,
somehow,
we
but
didn't
I don't
figure
know.
insurance on that
Or
one.
disability or health or FICA or
Social Security.
Last
She
night
figured
she was
Social Security
figuring
in
social,
too.
she was
Yeah.
figuring things last night, but I
it's-
don't
But
know.
it's not in here. Okay.
We don't,
Well, I
we
can
didn't
do
have
that.
some of the figures when we put this together.
Yeah, that's fine.
As far as the, we figured the TFFR, we figured FICA, and we figured insurance for the new teachers if you hired 3 new positions. Base salary would be $151,200 for the 3 teachers. The TFFR we figured would be about 19,000 and some. FICA would be about 11,500 and some. Insurance, if you figure they're single and you paid 80% of that, that would be 15,000 there, which for hiring 3 new teachers would be 197,453, and I'll get you copies of this. As far as Tiny Eye, like I said, we're looking at Tiny Eye saying that, seeing if you saw the students 3 times a week, which would equal that hour for $80 an hour, times 35 weeks, that's gonna run you about $831,600, $831,600, and that doesn't include the cost of the para, doesn't include the cost of the equipment or the room or anything like that.
And that's for all, if you took every child that's on a speech
Speech and
IEP?
language, yeah.
Okay.
Hence, there's it right there.
And the other thing about Tiny Eye that needs to be researched, because Dot was under the understanding that Tiny Eye did all the paperwork, all the assessments. We just need a pair to get them in there and the equipment in the room. Well, I talked to people from Terry Tucker's unit, West River Special Education, and they are still doing the paperwork for Tiny Eye. So, yeah,
Why would they do that?
I don't know
Because
if.
they love it?
No, I'm thinking that
Don't
maybe
worry.
Tiny Eye doesn't do the paperwork. I'm not so sure because
Yeah.
their speech pathologist still had to go to the meetings and still had to do the paperwork. So to me, the cost of Tiny Eye, if we still have to do the paperwork,
I just ran this speech LP budget, the entire shot for the district counting everything is $721,000. Just as a reference number.
and so Tiny Eye is like way out there for the total cost of that.
Yeah, it'd be 100,000 more according to this, but I don't know.
And I don't think that included the wages of the para,
Yeah.
Okay.
which with
So-
everything would be about another
Yeah,
20.
if you could email us that information, we would appreciate that. That will help us. Are we going to be able to mutually extend the timeline? And I will have Twyla send out some type of meeting, something or other. And if all 6 of you want to show up, that's fine. If you want to pick a couple representatives to come and sit down with the assistant superintendent and I, that's fine. However you would like to proceed so that we can try and come to some agreement on how to address this year.
What are you suggesting the extension be?
I think we take it on kind of a day-by-day basis. The only thing that I would ask, or a meeting-by-meeting basis. The only thing that I would ask today is March, what, 2nd? So according to the terms of the negotiated agreement, I have 8 days in which I'm supposed to provide a reply. The only thing I'd ask is that, say, on March 15th, we say, no, this isn't working, that I still have 8 days to provide a reply.
8 days from March 15th?
Yes. That's the only thing I would ask, that we have that understanding. And we will do our darndest to get us something scheduled next week. I need somebody to tell me whether that works or not.
Would you like to discuss?
You guys want to discuss it?
I think we should.
Okay.
Can we have a couple minutes, Dr. Sullivan?
Sure. We'll go and Vincent.
It's easier for us to move.
Yeah.
Do you want that off during this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I'll try and make this a copy.
Where's that copy?
In color, if that's what it
Vince
is.
took it, I think. That top one.
In color?
No,
No.
it doesn't have to be.
Okay, thank you.
You can pause it if you want to.
But
I don't know.
Is it pause? He can't request ours. Yeah, just.
How are you guys feeling right now?
I was confused as to what was he saying? We'll meet next week and then what was the 15th about?
We'll meet next week, and then if we can't come to an agreement by the 15th, he has 8 days to respond in writing.
I thought he wanted 15th plus 8. I thought he wanted you to extend the 10th to the 15th. And then if he still couldn't get it,
But he would
communicate with
us
you and give him another
say,
8.
I'm still don't have everything together. Can I have another 8 days?
So that would be by March 23rd, then,
23rd, we would
3rd.
have.
He'd have a written response by March 23rd meeting, we would have the
right now.
opportunity to
But I
go
would
forward.
clarify that with him.
Okay.
Say, no, this is what we understand. That at the latest, we would have a written response would be March 23rd. Right?
And what is his written response? Is that just a,
Yes or no?
No,
that we
thank you,
can't-
or-
They can or can't do
Or
it.
solution.
or a solution?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think?
Do you feel like it's productive?
Well, I feel we're sort of semi-positive.
I do
I
too.
mean, we're not.
I
I
do
do
too.
too.
But I
It
think you
wasn't
guys
like
should
those
meet
other
together.
ones.
I can't.
I don't
get
think the couple
Ray, Bill?
representatives, because
Yeah,
you're
I
doing
agree.
very
No,
well
I think we need to all-
together.
I agree.
Yes.
I can't get a feel for where he's at. And I
Well, he's not
I
gonna
don't-
let you know
I don't
that.
understand what he's not understanding. I
The
guess
whole
he did
time
the
business was
time.
really tough
All
for
right, he
me.
was trying to say, okay, well, the teacher has prep time, so if we give you guys prep time, you should be good.
Yeah.
Is what I was getting the impression. Is what he wanted to, oh, well, if it's the same thing, then, we'll just give you prep time and then you'll be fine. I don't see how it could give you that, because then you wouldn't be seeing kids
Right.
and you wouldn't be in compliance.
And he's
so.
looking at what portion of that is the same.
And we weren't trying to minimize regular ed at all.
No.
Well, and it's hard
Believe me.
it's hard to equivalate. Like,
You-
I don't even know how to answer that.
I didn't
How
understand
do I
it.
say,
But-
if a
but here,
teacher needs
and we could-
2 hours prep time, I need 15? I don't know. I honestly don't know how to.
So if you
answer
feel
that.
we should probably finish, and what do you think?
Are we saying
Yeah,
yes?
that's fine.
I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
Oh, okay.
You're ready.
You guys kept a copy of this, or?
No, didn't take anything.
Which one is that?
And then I'm gonna, that month,
You just named the one.
this was a
that
tough
he
month.
gave you.
This was a tough month.
I did have some videos on to add to that about the para, so I will type that up and email it to you tonight.
We're fine with extending this, and that we just want to make sure we're understanding is that you wanted that extended to March 15th,
No,
and then if it wasn't working, it would be till the 23rd.
no.
Okay,
I
could
don't
you
want,
restate
I
it?
don't want the extension to have a deadline until such time as we're sitting in a meeting. I don't care if it's on April 12th. But if we look at each other on April 12th to say this isn't working, then I have 8 days. You know, I'm hoping that we can craft a solution much more quickly than that. But I wasn't suggesting that March 15th was the end gate.
That was what we thought you were stating. Was that everybody else thought?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
No, I just pulled a date out of the air.
So what you're saying is we'll set a next meeting.
So I will send out a meeting thing, and as I said, you decide whether you want to send representatives or if all 6 of you want to come, that's fine. And that won't be a problem. And if at the end of that meeting, you look at me and say it's not working, you can say we're not agreeing. All you have to do is look at me and say we're not agreeing to mutually extend beyond today. And I will say fine. You'll have your reply in 8 days. That's all it will take.
Okay, and we've already decided we want to meet all 6 of us.
Okay, that's fine. She'll send it to all 6 of you.
Is there anything you'd like from us at the next meeting?
Well, I'd just like for, just let me just say this, you know. The life of a school superintendent is an interesting journey. And, you know, I have an obligation to the district to look at it from a district perspective. And I respect everything that you've said and how you look at it from your perspective. I have to look at it a little bit more globally and try and see if there are implications for the district related to other positions in the district. And so maybe you can have some of those conversations amongst yourselves, because at some point in time I'm going to have to. You know, I'm going to have to say this is why it won't work, or this is why it will work. And so, you know, and see if you can drill down on some type of objective piece. And like I said earlier, the 2.6, I don't think that's objective, because there is no established caseload. And so what I'd like to do actually, you know, is just leave it there, because I think we've had a very productive conversation. And I'm hoping that we can try and move this forward as productively the next time we meet, hopefully next week. And that's where I'd like to leave it, and let you have some conversations amongst yourselves, because as I said, it doesn't have to be 100% objective, what we come up with, but it has to be close enough where Vince doesn't have to wear an orange jumpsuit.
That would look good in orange.
The one thing I do want to say is I didn't turn in my resignation, but I can't do another year like this.
We're trying.
And there are a couple other people here who are saying the same thing. And I'm afraid, you know, I'm just afraid that there are going to be a lot of us that aren't going to be here next year
We're afraid of
if
that
things
too.
don't change.
Yeah.
We're afraid of that too.
Yeah.
And I
We
have-
really are.
And I
That,
have a
you know,
timeline at a different job that I was hoping we would have some resolution.
We would really
No,
love to
it's
be kept
kind
in
of-
the loop on future developments too.
a lot.
Well, you'd mentioned the idea of hiring people from the Philippines. We know that's a possibility, that's all we know. We don't know if it's been followed up on. We would love to be kept in the loop.
Well, Vince is
We don't know
giving-
what's going on with
Well,
that.
he's giving it to his assistant, and she's trying to research it right now.
Okay.
We know that some of these people from the Philippines have been, I know that they were hired in Sydney, because I talked to their superintendent about our challenges. And where else, Vince? where else in the state? There was
Williston.
someplace- Williston, yep, Williston. So those, I mean, we're working on it. But Cindy has to get the information, and because we don't even know how to navigate it right now.
Right. Well, and I would assume there's some time involved in that with
I'm sure there
paperwork
is.
and, you know,
I'm sure there is.
visas or whatnot, I
So,
don't know,
well,
but.
ladies, thank you.
Can we aggressively go after someone? I mean, can you, we have a candidate, Kathy King, do you remember Kathy King?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She would like to return and work here, but she doesn't want to come unless we're fully, going to be near fully staffed. She's coming from Wisconsin, she's retiring in Wisconsin, moving back here. Can somebody from administration contact her? And otherwise, we're going to lose her to someone else
Well,
in
if you send me
Dickinson.
your contact information, we'll make a phone call.
Okay.
Actually, send your contact information to Vince,
Yep.
and he'll come and see me.
Hey, any leads you got, we'll take them.
We would hire somebody today if we could find them. I mean, that's because he's been holding that marker for 2 years.
She is moving back to Dickinson, and she's interested in coming and working in this district, but she doesn't want to come and work like we are.
Yeah, and just so you know, 2 years ago, we had one opening and we found two, and we hired them both when Callahan came.
Mhm.
We didn't have that position, but I got to the budget committee faster than you could imagine and said, if we got two that'll take a contract, we're going. So we extended at that point just because human capital became available and we snapped it up, so. And that would be no different if 3 walked in tomorrow.
And I have one other comment too. If you're researching numbers in other places, one thing to keep in mind too is a lot of those places that have higher numbers, they also have SLPAs working under them that might not be listed as their caseload size or with their number of staff members.
If you can find an SLPA, send us their contact information and we will call them.
Yeah,
Because we've tried.
Well, and what she's referring to is maybe I have 60, but I have 2 SLPAs that are
Yeah,
doing
I
all the
understand.
therapy and I'm doing the
Okay.
testing
Yeah, I
and
understand.
meetings.
Just want to make sure that was clear.
And it's hard for us to figure out what caseloads are because that's
Yeah.
not reported.
Honda's
that
moving
way.
after that, too.
Okay, thank you, ladies.
Yeah.
Thank you.